Thank you for watching the video. This is YouTube Medical University. If you have diabetes, you shouldn't eat sweets. You shouldn't overeat because it can lead to diabetes. That's what people often say. This time, for those who have diabetes or are at risk of developing it, I'll introduce recommended eating habits and 8 specific foods for you. Diabetes causes damage to various organs throughout the body due to high blood sugar levels. A condition called arteriosclerosis occurs when high blood sugar levels cause a substance called advanced glycation end products, AGEs, which damage blood vessels. As a result, you may lose your eyesight and go blind. Your kidneys may fail and require dialysis. You may experience nerve damage that causes numbness in your hands and feet, or you may become more susceptible to infections. These are just some of the various complications that can occur. Furthermore, even if you don't have diabetes, a rapid spike in blood sugar itself is said to cause arteriosclerosis. In other words, if you eat the wrong way, if you keep eating foods that easily raise your blood sugar, your blood vessels are more likely to get clogged in the future, making you more prone to various health problems. At YouTube Medical University, we provide useful information from the perspective of doctors who actually diagnose and treat diabetes, so you can start using it as soon as tomorrow. We responsibly share information that can help you become healthier. Hospitals, by their very structure, receive medical fees for diagnosing and treating illnesses after you become sick. However, while treating diseases is important, it's also crucial to prevent illness or detect it early, right? That's why we've been sharing information to help you discover health issues early and live a vibrant life, even before you get sick. If you'd like, please subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss any new videos. Now, here is today's agenda. First, in the first section, I'll introduce 3 dietary methods to prevent arteriosclerosis. In the second section, I'll share 8 dietary tips to help control sudden spikes in blood sugar. In the third section, I'll talk about 2 ways to eat fruit without raising your blood sugar. And in the fourth section, I'll recommend 4 specific fruits you should eat. By watching this video to the end, whether you have diabetes or not, you'll learn how to control sudden increases in blood sugar and understand exactly what and how much you should eat. The video is a bit long, but I'd be happy if you watch it all the way through. Now let's start with the first section, 3 dietary methods to prevent arteriosclerosis. The first of the 3 dietary methods to prevent arteriosclerosis is this: practicing vege first. Those of you who are health conscious may have heard the term vege first. I actually practice it myself. Veg first means starting your meal by eating vegetables first. There is data showing that this can suppress a rapid rise in blood sugar, known as a blood sugar spike, and that's only natural because dietary fiber isn't digested and reaches the intestines. That's why blood sugar doesn't rise quickly. So if you eat vegetables first and then eat fast absorbing carbohydrates, your blood sugar will rise more gradually. I think that's easy to understand. In fact, in a study conducted on Japanese people, the group that practiced veggie first had a more gradual rise in blood sugar compared to the group that ate their meals normally. And what you need to be careful about is that it's not enough to just do veg first. You also need to chew each bite about 20 times. In other words, take your time eating. This study also involved eating foods with a low glycemic index value, which don't raise blood sugar easily. So along with veggie first, mealtime. And let's also remember about the glycemic index value. I'll talk about glycemic index values in the fruit section in the latter half of the video. Many of you may have heard up to this point. But along with veggie first and vegetables, there's one more thing. Recent studies have shown that there's actually something else you should eat first. That's protein. This is also based on Japanese research where they compared a group that ate white rice first with a group that ate either canned mackerel or beef before the rice. The group that ate mackerel or beef first had a slower rise in blood sugar compared to the group that ate rice first. Based on these results, I teach people to make a conscious effort to eat protein along with vegetables first. If you remember it as vege-protein first, I think it'll be easier to understand. Please give it a try. Protein is usually in the side dishes, right? So, starting with the side dishes. If you thought that if you eat the side dishes first, you'll end up having to eat just plain white rice at the end, I feel the same way. So specifically, you can add shredded salad chicken to your salad or put some cheese on top. If you make a salad with vegetables and tofu and try to eat vegetables and protein together, you'll end up eating more vegetables and taking more time to eat, which helps you practice veggie protein first. That's why I recommend eating this way. Please give it a try. Suppressing arteriosclerosis. The second of the 3 recommended eating habits is to make sure you eat 3 proper meals a day. If you're thinking, of course everyone says to eat 3 meals a day. I wouldn't bother introducing something that's just common sense. According to a certain study, they gathered 22 patients with type 2 diabetes and compared their blood sugar levels when they ate 3 meals a day versus when they ate only 2 meals a day, skipping breakfast and only eating lunch and dinner, even though the calories per meal were the same. When they skipped breakfast, their blood sugar levels after lunch and dinner were higher than usual. In other words, even if you eat the same food later, skipping breakfast causes your blood sugar to rise more after those meals. It's a surprising result that the way your blood sugar rises actually changes. Let me explain this in simple medical terms. When we eat rice, it's broken down into a sugar called glucose. When this glucose is absorbed into the bloodstream, it raises what's called blood sugar levels, and if these levels are high, it leads to diabetes. So how do we lower blood sugar? It's lowered by a hormone called insulin. Insulin is a hormone released from the pancreas. Insulin doesn't actually break down glucose. Insulin's role is to move glucose from the blood into the cells that need nutrients. Try to imagine how the pancreas and your cells feel. When you skip breakfast, your body goes into a state of starvation. So when lunch finally comes, your body tries hard to eat quickly, absorb everything, and raise your blood sugar. As a result, your blood sugar rises rapidly, and the pancreas gets surprised by this sudden spike in blood sugar. The body thinks it needs to release a lot of insulin to lower the blood sugar, so insulin is released all at once, causing your blood sugar to drop rapidly. This creates a blood sugar spike where your blood sugar rises and falls sharply, just like in this illustration. If you understand the reason behind it, it's easier to remember. It's said that these blood sugar spikes are a cause of arteriosclerosis. So, skipping meals and then suddenly overeating makes your blood sugar more likely to rise. Even on busy mornings, please try to eat the foods and fruits I'll introduce later. The third way to prevent arteriosclerosis with your diet is to eat a balanced meal. Some of you might think, of course, eating 3 balanced meals a day is obvious, but even if you know that, it's not always easy to do, right? So, how good is it for your health to actually eat a balanced diet? If you understand the reasons behind it, you'll realize how important it is and want to incorporate it into your daily life. There's a study from Japan about this. There's a study that looked at how blood sugar levels change depending on what you eat. When you eat only carbohydrates, when you eat carbohydrates and protein, and when you eat carbohydrates and fat. I think most of you can already guess the results. Only the group that ate a diet consisting solely of carbohydrates had a rapid increase in blood sugar after eating. The other groups, who ate carbohydrates along with protein or fat, had a more gradual rise in blood sugar. What do you think about that? It's not just about eating vegetables first. Having protein and fat together with your meal is actually important for your blood sugar. Earlier, I mentioned vege-protein first. In other words, it's important to eat vegetables, protein, and fat together, not just carbohydrates. That's why nutritionists and health programs on television always say to eat a balanced diet and have 3 meals a day. It's because there's data like this to support it. Isn't it interesting when you understand the reason behind it? Let's review the first lesson. I introduced 3 dietary methods to prevent arteriosclerosis, starting with vege-tan first instead of just veg first. The second point was not to skip breakfast, but to make sure to eat 3 meals a day. And finally, I explained that eating protein and fat together with carbohydrates makes it harder for your blood sugar to spike. By the way, some of you might be wondering if things like fasting or eating only 1 meal a day, which have become popular, are really good for your health. I've made a video about this in the past, so if you're interested, please check out the video linked in the description after this. In the second part, I'll talk about what kinds of foods you should actually eat. I'll specifically introduce my 8 recommended foods. The foods I'll introduce this time are chosen based on how they affect blood sugar levels, how easy they are to get, and their affordability. I chose them based on how easy they are to include in your meals. Please use this as a reference. Out of the 8 foods I'll introduce, half of them, 4, are sources of protein. I'll also recommend 2 types of vegetables, 1 carbohydrate, and finally, I'll introduce a fruit. Here are 8 dietary tips to help prevent rapid spikes in blood sugar levels. The first one is natto. When you think of Japanese people, you think of natto. This natto is actually a superfood. I eat natto almost every day when I have lunch. Natto contains something called pectin. It contains nutrients that are believed to help control blood sugar levels. Also, natto is a source of protein, right? The protein in these soybeans is said to have a good balance of amino acids among proteins. And that's not all. Natto is also rich in vitamins and minerals. There's even a substance called nattokinase that is believed to help thin the blood. As I mentioned in the first lecture, it's very important to consume protein along with carbohydrates. Prices are rising, but sometimes you can still find a pack of natto with 3 servings for under 100 yen, please. Why not try eating 1 pack a day? Here are 8 dietary methods to help prevent sudden spikes in blood sugar levels. The second one is chicken. We've emphasized this many times before on YouTube Medical University. We recommend eating chicken rather than red meat. So, what's the difference between red meat and white meat? Actually, red meat, meaning beef and pork, and especially processed meats like ham, hamburger patties, and sausages are said to increase the risk of colon cancer. Of course, it's not that eating them at all is a risk, but consuming a certain amount is considered a risk factor for colon cancer, so please be careful. On the other hand, chicken does not have these risks pointed out, and among meats it is said to have less fat and more protein. Chicken breast and tenderloin are especially recommended. These are often sold for less than 100 yen per 100 grams when they're on sale at the supermarket. You can mix them into salads, make minced chicken, or add them to stir-fried side dishes. The ways to cook them are really versatile. Protein is a nutrient that is often expensive or lacking, so please try to consciously include it in your diet. If you want to know more about the relationship between red meat and colon cancer, I've put a video link in the description, so please check it out after this. The third way to control rapid spikes in blood sugar is eggs. Although the price of eggs has gone up a lot, I included them because they're still easy to incorporate into daily meals. Eggs are said to be a complete food. Eggs contain carbohydrates. Because eggs contain protein, fat, and many vitamins, it's said that just eating one can help you get a well-balanced intake of nutrients. One thing to note is that eggs don't contain dietary fiber, so you'll need to get that from other sources. I mentioned earlier that it's better to have carbohydrates and protein together, right? So things like fried eggs with rice or rice with raw egg. And as an example of the veggie and protein first approach, you can add chopped boiled eggs to a salad. In this way, eggs can be used in all kinds of dishes. You can use eggs in all kinds of cooking. To make sure you use them intentionally, you could make a rule for yourself to eat at least 1 egg a day and expand your egg repertoire. This might help prevent your blood sugar from rising too quickly. My recommendation, which I used to do a lot when I was busy in college, is to boil 10 eggs at once in a pot and store them in the fridge. You should be careful about salt intake, but it's also a good idea to keep them as seasoned eggs. Boiled eggs are great for busy mornings as a snack when you're a little hungry, or as an extra dish for dinner. I really recommend making and storing them smartly. Now, the fourth tip for meals that help prevent blood sugar spikes is canned mackerel. I've talked about canned mackerel many times before. The oil found in mackerel is actually good for your body. Oils are divided into saturated fatty acids and unsaturated fatty acids. Most saturated fats are found in things like salad oil, butter, and the fat in red meat. Unsaturated fatty acids, on the other hand, are found in fish. These are the lighter oils, like those found in olive oil and flaxseed oil. Saturated fatty acids tend to raise cholesterol and triglyceride levels, while unsaturated fatty acids are expected to help stabilize or even lower cholesterol. Mackerel is actually considered a superfood. It contains plenty of unsaturated fatty acids called docosahexaenoic acid and eicosapentaenoic acid. There is also data showing that the more fish you eat, the lower your risk of developing arteriosclerosis, which is when the blood vessels in your heart and brain become clogged. It's said that eating just 100 grams a week can have an effect. In other words, by eating mackerel, you not only get protein and help slow the rise in your blood sugar, but the eicosapentaenoic acid and docosahexaenoic acid also have beneficial effects. You can also lower the risk of your heart and brain blood vessels becoming clogged. If it's canned mackerel, it keeps well. I think it's easy to include even on busy days. And since mackerel is packed with umami, it's surprisingly delicious even when mixed into things like pasta. If you think this is a good idea, pause this video for a moment and stock up on mackerel. The fifth way to control sudden spikes in blood sugar is this. Among vegetables, it's broccoli. Everyone, broccoli has actually recently been recognized as an essential vegetable for the country and has been designated as a specified vegetable. It's been half a century since potatoes, but now broccoli has become a specified vegetable. But putting that story aside, why did I point out broccoli? Actually, broccoli is a vegetable that's high in protein compared to other vegetables. Per 100 grams cabbage has 1.2 grams of protein. Carrots have 0.7 grams and green peppers also have 0.7 grams. In contrast, broccoli contains 5 grams, by the way. Even rice, which is a carbohydrate, only contains 2.5 grams. In other words, by eating broccoli, you can efficiently get protein. Protein is expensive and hard to get enough of, so it's important to get as much as you can from all kinds of foods. Although I don't mention it in this video, taking in about as many grams of protein as your body weight can help reduce the risk of frailty frailty, which is when your legs and lower body get weak, your muscle strength declines and you become more likely to fall or need nursing care. That's why I keep recommending protein, and when it comes to getting protein from vegetables, broccoli is the way to go. But that's not all. Broccoli is a vegetable with a very well-balanced nutritional profile. Vitamin B, vitamin C, vitamin E, and vitamin K. And it also contains concentrated nutrients like iron and potassium. Recently, frozen broccoli and similar products have been sold at convenience stores and wholesale supermarkets. When you don't have time to boil vegetables, you can buy frozen broccoli and use it in your lunchbox or as a side dish for breakfast. I recommend trying those kinds of ideas. I actually do them myself. Here is the sixth way to control sudden spikes in blood sugar. Wakame seaweed. When you think of wakame, you probably think of dried wakame. Even a small amount will expand a lot when you soak it in water. At first glance, wakame might seem like it doesn't have any nutrients, but it's actually very impressive. That's because of its soluble dietary fiber. There are two types of dietary fiber, soluble and insoluble. Both are important, but insoluble fiber doesn't dissolve, so it helps form stool and improves bowel movements. Soluble dietary fiber, on the other hand, dissolves in water, softens stool, and nourishes the intestines, helping to balance gut bacteria. And that's not all. In fact, there are reports that it may help slow the rise in blood sugar levels. Soluble dietary fiber is actually pretty hard to get in your diet, which is why I recommend wakame, since it's easy to eat. Foods that contain soluble dietary fiber tend to have a slightly slimy or sticky texture, like wakame or okra. And it's also found in foods like natto, which I mentioned earlier, so I encourage you to try including these in your diet. Mixing natto and okra together and eating them is also a great option. The seventh way to help prevent a rapid spike in blood sugar is with barley rice. Everyone. You probably think that carbohydrates tend to raise blood sugar easily. That image is correct. You need to be careful with carbohydrates. Rice, noodles, and bread are delicious, right? But if you eat too much of them, your blood sugar will go up. Among carbohydrates, you especially need to watch out for white carbohydrates. Things like white rice, bread, and also white noodles like udon and somen. These carbohydrates are refined. For example, in the case of rice, the husk is removed, leaving only the pure carbohydrate, which is what we call white carbohydrates. In other words, because they are pure, they tend to raise blood sugar levels easily. For this reason, brownish carbohydrates are recommended as carbohydrates that don't cause a rapid spike in blood sugar. That's why I introduced barley instead of white rice. Instead of regular bread, using whole wheat bread or noodles like soba that contain bran are said to make it harder for blood sugar to rise. Have you ever tried barley? I usually eat rice with a bit of barley mixed in. Barley actually has a chewy texture and a slightly popping feel, and it's really delicious. Eating only barley can be a bit tough, but if you mix it with white rice at about a 2-to-1 ratio, it's very tasty. Some of you might think that brown rice is the healthiest rice, and of course brown rice is excellent. However, barley is even better. Per 100 grams of rice, brown rice only has 3 grams. Brown rice doesn't contain much dietary fiber, but barley actually contains about 13 grams. That's clearly a lot more. And to add to that, this barley I just mentioned, it has a high proportion of soluble dietary fiber, which makes it less likely to raise blood sugar levels. In other words, it has a lot of dietary fiber, so your blood sugar rises more gradually. And thanks to the soluble fiber, it can also improve bowel movements and further suppress spikes in blood sugar. Please try adding it to your diet starting tomorrow. It helps prevent sudden increases in blood sugar. The 8th dietary tip is fruit. Some people might think if you have diabetes, you shouldn't eat fruit, right? I think there are quite a few people who feel that way, but that's not actually what I recommend. What's important is the total calorie intake. It's true that fruit contains a lot of sugar, so the calories can add up quickly. However, if you eat the right amount, fruit is rich in dietary fiber, vitamins, and minerals, so I actually think it's good to include it in your diet. So in the 4th period, I'll introduce recommended ways to eat fruit. Let's review the 3rd period. 8 foods that help control blood sugar spikes such as natto. Chicken breast, eggs, canned mackerel, broccoli, wakame seaweed, barley, and fruit were also introduced. And in the 3rd period, we talked about how you can incorporate fruit into your diet. I'll introduce 2 tips on how to control the rise in blood sugar levels. Controlling the rise in blood sugar levels. 2 ways to eat fruit. The first tip is to include it in your breakfast. Just hearing about fruit in the morning gives you a healthy image, right? But what happens if you eat it at night? At night, you're just going to sleep afterwards, so even if your blood sugar rises, it won't be converted into energy. Instead, the excess calories will be stored as fat in your body. So, if you think about it, wouldn't it be better to eat fruit during times when you'll be working, doing housework, or using your brain? In other words, when you'll be burning calories. Fruit is also rich in water. When you're busy and don't have time to drink water, eating fruit can help you get both water and minerals. I make a conscious effort to eat fruit in the morning. Here's the second way to eat fruit to help control your blood sugar. Eat fruit instead of snacks. In fact, compared to sweet chocolate, fruit is of course lower in calories. If you compare them by the gram, eating just half a chocolate bar has more calories than eating a whole apple. And with a chocolate bar, you might think half isn't enough, so you end up eating the whole thing. But how about eating a whole apple? It's pretty filling, and you might even feel like you've had enough. You might even feel like you don't need lunch. In other words, fruit is filling, contains a lot of water, and is rich in dietary fiber, so including it as a snack can help prevent overeating. What do you think? If you thought fruit isn't a good snack, try to stick to the right amount and actively include it in your diet. As for the specific amount, think of it as about enough fruit to fit in a small bowl. A large plate would be too much, so keep it to about a small bowl's worth. If you want to be more precise, it's said to be about 80 kilocalories, which is roughly 100 to 150 grams of fruit. That's about the same weight as a small bowl of rice, but since that might still be hard to picture, I'll introduce some specific fruits as examples next. Thank you for waiting. Now, I'd like to introduce my top 4 recommended fruits that I actually include in my diet. Here are my 4 recommended fruits. The first one is this, an apple. As I mentioned earlier, apples are quite filling, aren't they? Compared to other fruits, apples are relatively firm, which is one of their characteristics, and these apples, what's good about them is their glycemic index value, which is an indicator of how much your blood sugar rises, is relatively low. In other words, having a low glycemic index value means that even if you eat them, your blood sugar level will rise more gradually. A rapid increase in blood sugar is a risk factor for arteriosclerosis, right? So it can be considered that such risks are relatively low, and apples are sold at most regular supermarkets, aren't they? They're not that expensive either. In terms of how easy they are to include in your diet, I recommend apples. As a specific guideline, try to limit yourself to 1 apple a day, even if you eat them daily. So one way is to cut an apple into thirds and eat a third in the morning, a third at lunch, and a third in the evening. The second fruit that helps control blood sugar levels is the banana. When I was in college, I played tennis and I used to eat bananas between matches. Even now, I always keep bananas on hand. In the clinic, patients often ask me, "Doctor, is it okay to eat bananas?" Bananas are inexpensive, easy to store, and convenient, aren't they? And they're also really delicious when you add them to things like yogurt. Why is that? The reason I recommend bananas is because, like apples, bananas are actually considered a food with a relatively low glycemic index. Of course, compared to rice, bananas are absorbed more quickly, so I try to eat them during sports, but among fruits as a whole, their glycemic index isn't particularly high. Furthermore, when it comes to the risk of arteriosclerosis, it's not just blood sugar that matters. Blood pressure is also important. Bananas are rich in potassium, which is expected to help lower blood pressure. For these reasons, bananas are a fruit that's rich in minerals and can be expected to have a positive effect on blood pressure. That's why I recommend bananas. By the way, for people who have diabetes and whose kidneys have started to deteriorate, there are cases where potassium can't be excreted properly by the kidneys and its levels can rise easily. For those people, it's important to be careful not to eat too many bananas, so please keep that in mind. Please make sure to consult with your primary doctor when eating them. Now for the third and fourth fruits that help control blood sugar levels. Here they are. Kiwi and blueberries. Isn't that a bit surprising? These two fruits have something in common. They are both rich in dietary fiber. Both kiwi and blueberries are said to contain about 3 to 5 grams of dietary fiber per 150 grams. With other fruits, even if they contain dietary fiber, it's usually only about 1 gram. In other words, that's 3 to 5 times more. Since you can get dietary fiber, having dietary fiber means you can expect a more gradual rise in blood sugar levels. And furthermore, the carbohydrates found in fruit are glucose and fructose and sucrose. Glucose is the smallest unit, so eating it causes your blood sugar to rise more easily. In comparison, fructose and sucrose are made up of glucose and other sugars linked together, so they need to be broken down by digestive enzymes before being absorbed, which creates a time lag before your blood sugar rises. Because it takes time, the rise is more gradual. I know this was a bit technical, so it's okay if you forget the details. Kiwi and blueberries have a higher proportion of fructose and sucrose compared to glucose, which raises blood sugar more easily. Because of this, people often say that fruit raises blood sugar easily, but personally I recommend foods like kiwi and blueberries because they contain dietary fiber, fructose, and sucrose. Sometimes you can even find kiwis on sale for less than 100 yen each. I usually buy frozen blueberries at wholesale supermarkets or convenience stores. I eat them frozen as a snack like ice cream, or thaw them and mix them into yogurt, which is also delicious. In addition, blueberries are said to be good for your eyes, and recently, various other health benefits have been reported. Please try incorporating them into your daily life. Let's review. Here are 4 fruits that help suppress blood sugar spikes. Apples and bananas, which have a low glycemic index value and are easy to include in your diet, and those that are high in dietary fiber and have a high proportion of sucrose and fructose. I also introduced kiwis and blueberries. If you have any fruits that you include in your diet, or if you've noticed your blood sugar levels go down after eating certain things, please let me know in the comments. Lastly, I often get questions about fruit juice and dried fruits. When it comes to fruit juice, most of the dietary fiber and minerals are lost during the juicing process. Because of this, it becomes mostly refined sugar, so it's generally recommended to eat whole fruits as they are. It has been pointed out that people who frequently drink fruit juice have a higher risk of diabetes, so it's best to stick to water or tea for your beverages. Coffee and similar drinks are also recommended. Dried fruits might seem good because they're concentrated and let you eat a lot of fruit at once, but many dried fruits have a lot of sugar added during processing, so make sure to check the ingredient label on the back carefully. Be sure to check whether the dried fruit is natural or processed, and when it comes to fruit, it's best to eat it as it is. Eating fruit as it is gives you more water content and makes you feel fuller, which helps prevent overeating, so if you do eat dried fruit, treat it as a treat or something to enjoy occasionally. That's what I usually teach. How was it? This was a long video, but thank you for watching until the end. At YouTube Medical University, we create videos from a doctor's perspective that are easy to understand and give you concrete steps to become healthier starting tomorrow. Preventing illness and detecting it early are extremely important. It's also very important to have at least one trustworthy channel you can rely on. Please subscribe so you don't miss any new videos. It really encourages us. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share your experiences or what you learned in the comments. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. See you in the next video.